have had enough of your lies and your games.
My name is Emma Crawford, 32 years old, born and raised in Boston, a city that taught me that silence can hold more secrets than noise ever could. I work as a senior financial analyst, the kind of job that thrives on precision, on numbers that always tell the truth. Or at least, that's what I believed until the morning the email from the Swiss National Bank shattered that illusion. It was a cold Thursday, and the city outside my apartment window looked washed in pale light. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the notification appeared on my phone. Subject line: Courtesy notification. Account Haroa? The name of the sender made my stomach twist. Dear Ms. Crawford, this is a courtesy notice regarding an attempted access to your private account. If this was not you, please contact your account representative immediately. For a moment, I froze. The mug in my hand trembled slightly, spilling coffee onto the marble countertop. That account, my grandmother Eleanor's Swiss account, was supposed to be untouchable, known only to her and me. I stared at the screen, the letters blurring as my pulse quickened. Someone had tried to open the door to the one thing she had told me never to reveal. My phone rang almost immediately. Emma, darling. My mother's voice was sugar-sweet, too cheerful, too rehearsed. We're having dinner tonight, just family. There are things we need to discuss. Family matters. Those two words always came before disaster. They'd used them when they announced their divorce. When Dad remarried Patricia, his elegant new wife with her perfect smile, and her son, Jason, who suddenly became the center of every family celebration. And they'd used them again when they declared Jason would take over the family business, while I was told to focus on my own life. I'll be there, I replied calmly. But inside, I already knew what the family matter was. That evening, the Crawford mansion glowed under its golden lights, like a stage before a performance. The same mansion where I'd once played piano recitals as a child now felt foreign, too polished, too rehearsed, too full of ghosts. Inside, everything was picture perfect. Candles flickering, silverware gleaming, the faint scent of my mother's favorite perfume, jasmine and power. They were all seated when I walked in. Mom, Dad, Patricia, his new wife, draped in pearls, and Jason, my 35-year-old stepbrother, who had never worked a day in his life, smirking as if he'd already won something I hadn't even realized was up for grabs. Emma, sweetie, sit down, Mom said, gesturing to the only empty chair. We have something important to talk about. I took my seat quietly. Let me guess, I said softly. Grandma's inheritance? They all exchanged glances. There it was, the confirmation I didn't need but expected. Dad cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. Your mother and I have made some adjustments to the distribution of assets. Given recent circumstances, we feel it's best for the inheritance to go to Jason and his family. Patricia smiled faintly. They have a child now, Emma. A baby. They need security. Jason leaned back in his chair, smug and comfortable. You've got your career, he said. You'll be fine. Their words blurred together, responsibility, family unity, understanding. But beneath their well-practiced reasoning, I heard only one thing: greed, dressed in civility. In that moment, I remembered Grandma Eleanor's voice the night before she died, her frail hand clutching mine. "They'll try to take everything, my darling. Your father, Patricia, even your mother. But don't fight them with anger. Fight them with patience. The Swiss account, that's your safety net. Keep it secret until you have to." Now I understood why. I looked around the table, studying each face. Mom's lips curved in a smile she didn't feel. Dad kept adjusting his tie, his old nervous habit. Patricia pretended kindness while her eyes gleamed with quiet victory. And Jason was already planning how to spend what wasn't his. I set my glass down carefully. "So it's decided, then?" They nodded, relieved by my calmness, mistaking composure for surrender. "Well," I said, standing, "thank you for the dinner. I have an early meeting tomorrow." Jason smirked. "That's it? No argument?" I smiled faintly. "What's there to argue about? You've already made your decision." I walked out before anyone could reply. Outside, the night was cool and silent. The air carried the faint scent of rain and betrayal. As I unlocked my car, my phone buzzed again. Another email, this time from the Swiss National Bank. Unauthorized access attempt blocked. Security protocols activated. Please contact your account manager immediately. A slow, deliberate smile formed on my lips. Oh! While they were celebrating their little victory inside, the real story was already turning against them. The truth was simple. They thought they had stolen my grandmother's legacy. But they had no idea the real fortune, the real power, was hidden in the one place they'd never think to look. And Grandma had left the map only to me. When I was a child, my parents used to say that Sunday dinners kept families together. Back then, we'd laugh over roast chicken and mashed potatoes, and my grandmother, Eleanor, would tell stories about courage and cleverness, how her father rebuilt everything after the Great Depression, how she learned that blood ties don't always mean loyalty. Now, 30 years later, that same dinner table had become a courtroom. The laughter was gone, replaced by forced smiles and the faint tension of a verdict waiting to fall. The crystal chandelier above us reflected their polished facades like fragments of lies. My mother, perfectly poised in a cream dress, broke the silence first. "Emma," she said, her voice carrying that mix of sweetness and superiority I'd grown up dreading. "You've always been independent. We're proud of that. But you must understand, circumstances have changed." Dad nodded, as if rehearsed. "Yes, dear. Your grandmother's estate. It's been restructured." I placed my fork down carefully. "Restructured?" Jason shifted in his chair, smirking like a man who already knew the outcome. "They mean," he said, leaning forward, "that the inheritance will now be transferred to us. For the baby's future." The words echoed for a moment, absurd in their simplicity. The baby's future. That baby, barely 2 months old, had become their shield, their excuse for greed. Patricia, my father's new wife, cradled him like a trophy. "You're doing well, Emma," she added softly. "You don't need the money. Jason's building a family now. It's time he gets the support he deserves." Support he deserves? Jason, the same man who dropped out of 3 colleges. who once used the family business card to fund a yacht party in Miami. I wanted to laugh, but instead I smiled politely. And Grandma's wishes? Were they restructured too? Mom stiffened. Eleanor was confused toward the end. She wouldn't have wanted division among us. Dad cleared his throat. We've already moved forward. The assets have been legally transferred. That was when I realized this wasn't a discussion. It was a declaration. They'd come to tell me after it was done. As they spoke, the room seemed to shrink. I could hear the faint clinking of cutlery, the distant rain tapping the window pane. Behind their words was the unspoken truth. I was the outsider now, the daughter of the old marriage, the woman who'd chosen career over family, independence over obedience. They justified it as fairness. But fairness in this family had always meant whatever benefited Jason. Mom reached across the table, her fingers cold against mine. Try to understand, Emma. You've always had everything you needed. You're successful, respected, single. You don't have a family to care for. That last word, single, hung in the air like an accusation. I gently withdrew my hand. You're right, I said softly. I don't have a family to care for. Her lips curved into what she thought was victory. But it's funny, I continued. Grandma once told me that family isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who wouldn't sell your bloodline for comfort. For a second, silence ruled the table. Jason's smirk faltered. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Dad exhaled sharply, the way he used to when Grandma caught him lying about business deals. Then Mom straightened her shoulders, regaining her composure. You've always been dramatic, Emma, but you'll thank us one day. We're securing everyone's future. I looked around the dining room at the oil portraits, the antique vases, the family crest embossed on the wall. Everything about that house screamed legacy, and yet none of them understood the meaning of the word. They mistook inheritance for wealth, but Eleanor had taught me differently. Inheritance, she'd said, is not what you receive. It's what you protect. Her voice came back to me vividly, from that last winter when I visited her in Zurich before her health declined. They'll call it family business, Emma, she'd said, stirring her tea slowly. But it's theft dressed in dinner conversation. When that day comes, you must not argue. Let them take what they think is yours. Then, when the truth reveals itself, you'll understand that real power doesn't shout, it waits. Now, sitting in that dining room, I finally understood. Mom's voice broke the moment. We'd like you to sign some acknowledgement papers, dear. It's just a formality. Jason slid a folder toward me. The gold Crawford Industries logo shimmered under the light. I opened it casually, scanning the text. It wasn't just an acknowledgement, it was a complete relinquishment of claim. They hadn't even bothered to hide the legal language. My pulse steadied. Calm, deliberate, precise. Years of financial auditing had taught me how to stay composed under fire. I closed the folder, sliding it back across the table. Of course, I said. You've already taken everything. What's left to sign? Jason chuckled smugly. So you're not going to fight? I met his eyes. No, not tonight. That answer seemed to please them. Mom smiled, relieved. Dad exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Patricia whispered something to Jason, probably about how I'd finally come to my senses. But inside, I was already replaying the Swiss National Bank's message, unauthorized access attempt blocked. Grandma's safety net was alive, and now it was time to find out how deep her wisdom went. After dinner, I stepped outside into the crisp night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the driveway glistening under the moonlight. Behind me, laughter erupted again, thin, rehearsed, desperate. I looked back at the mansion one last time and whispered, "Enjoy the feast. The bill's coming soon." The engine roared to life as I drove away, headlights slicing through the darkness. In the rearview mirror, the house faded into the distance like a fading illusion. At that moment, I wasn't the disinherited daughter anymore. I was the keeper of a secret, one that would soon turn their empire upside down. There are moments in life that divide time in two, the before and the after. That night, driving back from the mansion, I crossed that invisible line. Côté noir. The windshield wipers swayed rhythmically against the drizzle, and the city lights smeared like streaks of gold and blue on the glass. My mind, however, wasn't on the road. It was 3,800 miles away, in Zurich, where my grandmother Eleanor had once told me, "The truest wealth isn't seen, Emma. It's guarded." I still remember that visit vividly. It was 2 winters before she passed, when I was working in London and took a detour to see her. She was living in a modest chalet near Lake Zurich, not the grand estates she could have afforded, but a quiet home surrounded by pine trees and the smell of coffee beans roasting from a nearby cafe. Even in her old age, she exuded that kind of calm power that doesn't need to announce itself. Her gray hair was always pinned up neatly, her blue eyes sharp enough to read through your soul. That afternoon, as the snow fell softly outside, she had taken out a small wooden box from her desk. "There's something you need to understand about this family," she'd said, sliding the box toward me. "We were built on pride, but we've survived on secrets." Inside the box was a key, silver, engraved with a faint pattern of mountain peaks. On its back, the number 7749. "This," she said, "is for when they finally show who they are. Because they will, my darling. Greed doesn't rest. It waits for weakness." I remember laughing nervously, not fully grasping her words. "Grandma, you make it sound like a spy movie." "Maybe it is," she smiled faintly. "Except in this one, the villain thinks he's family." That line would echo in my head years later when the Swiss National Bank email arrived. After her funeral, my parents had turned the estate into a battlefield. They sold her art collection, divided her properties, and paraded their grief at charity events. But no one mentioned the Swiss account. I had kept it secret, as instructed. The password, written on a slip of paper she made me memorize, was a mix of numbers and a single word: truth. Eleanor had built her fortune quietly, far beyond what anyone in the family knew. While my father bragged about stock gains and Jason flaunted rented sports cars, she had invested in renewable energy startups and biotech patents. She believed in creating value that outlives vanity. And now, as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the glowing skyline outside. I realized she'd done more than build wealth. She'd built a shield. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. The Swiss National Bank's message was still open on the screen. Unauthorized access attempt blocked. Whoever tried to access it had triggered a protocol, a digital tripwire Eleanor had probably set decades ago. I opened the encrypted folder she'd once shown me. Inside were scanned letters, certificates, and an instruction manual she'd typed herself. In case of breach, contact Mr. Weber, Zurich branch, Level 3 authorization. Mr. Weber? I remembered him vaguely, a tall, soft-spoken man with silver hair and the kind of precision only Swiss bankers possess. He'd attended Grandma's funeral, offering condolences with the subtle formality of someone who knew much more than he could say. I sent a short encrypted message. This is Emma Crawford, granddaughter of Eleanor Crawford. I received a security alert concerning account Jumber 72749. Please confirm next steps. Within minutes, I got a reply. Miss Crawford, your grandmother's protocols have indeed been activated. Please schedule a verification appointment at your earliest convenience. We have documents she left in anticipation of this situation. In anticipation? The phrase gave me chills. She had known, not guessed, not suspected, known that one day they would betray me. The next morning, I called in sick and booked a flight to Zurich. On the way to the airport, I passed by the old Crawford Industries billboard, Jason's smug face now plastered beside my father's. Building the future of family legacy, it read. I almost laughed at the irony. Eleanor used to say, when they build their castles out of lies, don't knock them down. Let the truth collapse them from within. That was her philosophy, not revenge, but exposure. She didn't believe in screaming battles or public scandals. She believed in patience, in precision, in consequences that unfold quietly and beautifully, like the gears of a Swiss clock. I landed in Zurich to a world of snow and silence. The air was cold enough to sting, but somehow it cleared my mind. I could almost hear her voice as I walked through the airport. Don't look for safety, Emma. Look for clarity. At the bank, I met Mr. Weber, tall, dignified, dressed in gray with a navy tie. His office overlooked the lake, the kind of serene view that hides unimaginable power beneath its calm surface. Miss Crawford, he greeted me with a polite bow. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She prepared for this moment long before you could imagine needing it. He opened a file on his desk. There have been attempts to forge documents. Signatures claiming you relinquished authority, power of attorney transfers, all fraudulent. He slid the documents toward me. The forged signatures were perfect copies of mine. I felt the air thicken in my chest. They actually tried, I whispered. Mr. Weber nodded solemnly. She predicted this, and she left you something that can't be stolen. He handed me a sealed envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed with crimson wax. The handwriting on it was unmistakable, to Emma. For when they finally try, my fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside, her words danced across the page, written in her elegant cursive. My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, they have shown their true colors. Don't waste tears. They are not worth your sorrow. The account they tried to steal is merely the gate, not the garden. You now hold the right to everything they thought they owned. Use it wisely. Expose them kindly. Win quietly. Love, Grandma. The letter smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent that lingered in her scarf the day she hugged me goodbye. I closed the envelope slowly, my hands steady now. For the first time since her passing, I didn't feel like the disinherited daughter. I felt like the heir she had chosen. Eleanor had not left behind money. She had left behind justice, carefully packaged in legal foresight, waiting for this very moment to bloom. And as I stepped out of the bank, the snow falling softly onto my coat, I whispered into the cold air, "Let's finish what you started, Grandma." Zurich always felt like a city carved out of silence. The air was thin, precise, like everything here existed under an unspoken rule of order. Inside the Swiss National Bank, that silence was sacred. The only sounds were the soft clicking of polished shoes on marble and the rhythmic hum of computers encrypting secrets. Mr. Weber led me down a long corridor lined with frosted glass doors. "Your grandmother's account isn't just an account, Miss Crawford," he explained. "It's a system she designed. Layers of trusts, foundations, and holding entities, all linked under an identity network only she and you could activate." I followed him into a private meeting room overlooking Lake Zurich. The water outside shimmered pale blue under the winter sun, calm and unbothered, like it had seen 1,000 human dramas before. He gestured toward a seat. "Please, have a look." On the table sat a sleek folder embossed with gold letters. Eleanor Crawford, Contingency Protocol. When he opened it, I expected numbers, balances, perhaps property deeds. But what I saw was something more deliberate, trapdoors built into inheritance. 2 weeks ago, he said, his voice low, a group claiming power of attorney submitted forged documents to access this account. The attempt triggered your grandmother's protective measures. As per her directives, we froze all affiliated transfers linked to the Crawford family's financial ecosystem. I leaned forward. "All affiliated, meaning?" He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen were cascading alerts, red text, rows of frozen accounts. Meaning, the Crawford Industries corporate funds, your father's executive trust, and certain private investment accounts tied to Patricia and Jason. I let out a slow breath. She set it up that way. Mr. Weber smiled faintly. "Yes. Your grandmother was remarkably thorough. She anticipated internal betrayal. Her instruction was clear. If unauthorized access occurs, initiate total review of all related assets." Outside, a faint reflection of my face merged with the city skyline. In that glass, I saw not fear, but something unfamiliar, control. Mr. Weber clicked a button, and the room dimmed slightly. Through a holographic diagram projected above the table, a web of blue lines connecting various offshore entities, foundations, and holding groups. "This," he said, "is the network she built over 30 years. Your family only knew about the visible assets, properties, domestic investments, minor accounts. But this," he gestured at the projection, "this is her true empire. I studied the map. The complexity was breathtaking. Each line represented foresight, each layer, protection. Eleanor had designed it like a chess player, 3 moves ahead of greed. She left detailed instructions for you, he continued, sliding another envelope toward me. And a note, one she said you'd understand only when you were ready. I opened it slowly. Inside was a short handwritten message. If they reach for what isn't theirs, let their hands burn on their own greed. You don't need to fight them, Emma. Just let the truth activate. I smiled, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. The activation wasn't metaphorical, it was literal. Every unauthorized attempt had set off automatic audits across multiple institutions. My grandmother hadn't just hidden money, she'd built justice into code. Miss Crawford, Mr. Key, Weber said, breaking my thoughts. Would you like to proceed with full authorization? It will trigger investigation notices to your family's domestic accounts. It may cause disruption. I paused, staring at the frozen lake outside. Disruption, I repeated softly. You mean panic? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. For a moment, I thought of my mother's smug expression at dinner, Jason's arrogant grin, Patricia's polished confidence. I thought of how easily they'd dismissed me as the unmarried daughter, the one who didn't need protection. I turned back to him. Proceed. Mr. Weber nodded and entered a string of verification codes. The screen flickered once, twice, and then lines of green confirmation text appeared. Contingency execution, active. Somewhere across the ocean, numbers began to vanish from screens. Account balances turned to 0. Transactions froze mid-transfer. What they thought they'd stolen was dissolving back into the system Eleanor had built. It was quiet revenge. Surgical. Legal. Absolute. An hour later, as Mr. Weber completed the digital verifications, my phone buzzed. I looked down to see the first message from my mother. Mom, Emma, something's wrong with the accounts. Are you doing something? I didn't reply. Seconds later, another buzz. Dad, we need to talk. Now. It's urgent. Then Jason, what the hell did you do? Everything's frozen. Even the baby's trust fund. I silenced the phone and set it face down on the table. Mr. Weber, without looking up, said quietly, they will realize soon that the bank acted on your grandmother's legal instructions, not your dope. You are merely the executor of her design. Executor, I repeated, the word heavy but satisfying. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the consequence. As the sun began to set, Mr. Weber poured me a glass of mineral water and leaned back in his chair. Your grandmother once told me, he said, that she believed in poetic justice. She said, if greed is inherited, so should wisdom be. I see now what she meant. I smiled faintly, tracing the rim of the glass. She always played the long game. He nodded. She also left instructions regarding the family business, Crawford Industries. Shall I show you? I raised an eyebrow. There's more? He opened another encrypted file, and there it was, a hidden clause in the company's charter, drafted years ago under an offshore holding. It transferred majority control to me, effective immediately upon confirmation of fraudulent activity by other heirs. She built a trigger condition into corporate law? I whispered in disbelief. Yes, he said simply. Your grandmother anticipated every move. I stood by the window, watching the first snowflakes settle over the city. My reflection looked like hers now, calm, unyielding. The phone on the table kept buzzing, notifications stacking endlessly. Desperation on display. But I felt no satisfaction, only clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance, restoring what was rightfully mine, and honoring the woman who believed in me when no one else did. I turned to Mr. Paulam Weber. Send the notifications to the UGAO and SVAO financial regulators. Let them audit every document. And Mr. Weber, yes, Miss Crawford? Make sure the Crawfords can see every report, every transfer reversal, every line that exposes what they tried to do. I want transparency to be their punishment. He nodded, understanding perfectly. Outside, the lake shimmered gold as the sun disappeared behind the Alps. Somewhere far away, my family was realizing that their perfect theft had turned into their own confession. And I was no longer the daughter left out of the will. I was the heir of a legacy that fought back. When I woke up the next morning in Zurich, I already knew something had changed. The air itself felt sharper, charged with that strange electricity that follows the moment a storm finally breaks. On the nightstand, my phone kept vibrating, buzz after buzz, messages piling up like debris after an avalanche. My parents, Jason, Patricia, even Amanda, who'd always stayed in the background, had texted a desperate line. Please, Emma. The accounts. What's happening? I didn't respond. Not yet. I slipped on my gray coat and stepped out onto the balcony. The lake below was still, glassy, indifferent. Somewhere across the ocean, chaos was unraveling, numbers freezing, investigations launching, facades collapsing. And all of it was set into motion by the quiet intelligence of one woman who'd been dismissed as too old to understand modern finance. Grandma Eleanor had understood everything. Back inside the bank, Mr. Weber was already waiting for me, files arranged neatly in front of him. Good morning, Miss Crawford, he said, his tone respectful but knowing. Your family has reached out to us multiple times overnight. Of course they have, I said. How bad is it? He turned his monitor toward me. Bad, he said, almost apologetically. The corporate funds they redirected to Jason's account are under criminal audit. The properties they tried to reassign through forged transfer deeds are frozen. And the family trust for the baby, let me guess, I interrupted. Flagged for fraud? He nodded. Precisely. It seems Mrs. Patricia attempted to use Eleanor's digital signature, which automatically activated our internal investigation. Quite elegant, actually. Elegant. That word fit Grandma perfectly. Her revenge was always designed to be graceful, an orchestra of timing and logic, not chaos and rage. I smiled faintly. She really thought of everything. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Mom. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but then I remembered something Grandma used to say. Sometimes you need to let the guilty speak. Silence makes them confess faster. I picked up. Emma. Her voice cracked through the speaker. You need to stop whatever you're doing. We just got notices from 3 banks, your father's accounts, Jason's company shares, they're frozen. Even the baby's trust. Interesting, I said calmly. Sounds like there's been a mistake. Don't play dumb, she hissed. You're the only one with access to Eleanor's accounts. You must have reported us. You're going to destroy this family. I leaned back in the chair, watching the light spill through the blinds. Destroy it? I said softly. No, Mother. I'm just letting the truth do its job. There was silence on the other end, the kind that only happens when a lie finally stops working. Then she whispered, trembling. What did she do, Emma? I almost felt sorry for her, almost. She protected me, I said. She protected what you tried to take. I ended the call before she could reply. Mr. Weber looked up, a question in his eyes. Will you be returning to Boston soon? Yes, I said. There's still one thing left to handle. He handed me a final set of documents, embossed with the Crawford Industries seal. Then you might need this. Your grandmother's clause regarding company ownership has been triggered. Legally, you now hold controlling interest. The air in the room seemed to pause. You mean? Yes, he said with a faint smile. The company your father tried to give to Jason is, in fact, yours. She structured it through a shell foundation that activates control transfer upon any fraudulent activity from designated heirs. The paperwork is quite ironclad. I exhaled slowly, feeling both awe and weight. She didn't just protect me, I murmured. She gave me power. That afternoon, I boarded my flight back to Boston. The city skyline glimmered below as the plane ascended, and I thought about how many years I'd spent trying to earn their approval, how many dinners I'd sat through, swallowing insults disguised as advice. Now, I didn't need approval. I had truth. By the time I landed, the headlines had started to circulate in the local business feeds. Crawford Industries under audit, after internal documents expose fraudulent transfers. Swiss bank investigation links family members to illegal access attempt. The tone was almost poetic, facts wrapped in formality, but the damage was done. My father's reputation, Patricia's social climbing image, Jason's future, all disintegrating. When I arrived at my apartment, the doorman gave me a curious look. Miss Crawford, there have been reporters outside the building all morning, he whispered. Let them wait, I said, walking past him. They'll have their story soon enough. That evening, sitting in my home office, I opened one of Grandma's final letters again. She'd written it 5 years ago, but it felt like she was standing beside me, whispering, If you ever doubt yourself, remember this. Our family mistook kindness for weakness. But kindness with backbone is the rarest kind of power. Use it. And when you act with precision, not fury. Those words steadied me. Because beneath the fury, I realized, was something deeper, a moral compass she had sharpened through decades of watching greed destroy generations. She hadn't wanted vengeance. She'd wanted restoration. So I began to work. For 3 days straight, I reviewed every file Mr. Weber had given me, stock certificates, board charters, trust conditions. The more I read, the clearer it became Eleanor had positioned me not as a passive beneficiary, but as the guardian of her entire legacy. By the fourth morning, I was ready. I scheduled a family meeting through the company's legal department. The title was simple: Crawford Industries Emergency Board Review. The meeting would be held in the executive conference room, the same room where they'd once announced Jason as the new CEO, while I'd been asked to take a support role. This time, the roles would reverse. The night before the meeting, as I stood by my window overlooking the city, I received one final text from Jason. "Please, Emma, can we talk before tomorrow? Don't do this." I typed slowly, deliberately. "You already did this, Jason. I'm just finishing what Grandma started." Then I set my phone down and exhaled. Tomorrow, the performance would begin again. The family gathered under chandeliers, pretending civility. But this time, I wouldn't be the quiet spectator. This time, I'd be the one holding the script. The conference room at Crawford Industries had always intimidated me. Polished mahogany table, gold-framed portraits of visionary Crawfords watching from the walls. The faint scent of expensive cologne and hidden resentment. This was the stage where I had once been silenced, where Jason was anointed future CEO while I was applauded for being so supportive. But that morning, as sunlight sliced through the tall glass windows, it wasn't intimidation I felt. It was clarity. The nameplate on the table no longer read Jason Crawford, Chief Executive Officer. It read Emma Crawford, Acting Chairwoman. When the door opened, the sound of frantic heels echoed first. Mom entered, pale but still clinging to her pearls. Behind her, Dad looked older, his tie askew, eyes hollow. Patricia came next, every trace of her usual poise gone. Her mascara had surrendered to tears, her once immaculate curls wilted. Jason followed last, carrying his baby's photo like a talisman against judgment. I rose slowly. "Please," I said, my voice steady. "Sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Jason scoffed, trying to salvage some authority. "What the hell is this, Emma?" "You can't just call a board meeting like you're in charge." I looked him dead in the eye. "Can I?" Then I slid a folder across the table, Grandma's claws, notarized and sealed under Swiss law. Dad picked it up, his hands trembling as he read the first line aloud. In the event of fraud, forgery, or unauthorized access by any family member, controlling shares shall transfer immediately to my granddaughter, Emma Crawford. He looked up, his lips parting in disbelief. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's very real," I said. "And so are the investigations currently underway in Zurich and Boston." Mom leaned forward, voice shaking. "Emma, please." "You don't understand. This will ruin us. The company, your father's reputation, everything." I leaned back, folding my arms. "You mean your version of everything?" The security team stood silently by the door. They weren't the old guards Jason had hired. I'd replaced them last night. Professionals, neutral, efficient, impossible to manipulate. Patricia's voice broke through the tension. "You can't just take our lives apart like this. What about Jason's son? Your nephew?" Her words hit a nerve, but not in the way she expected. I looked at her carefully, almost gently. I've set up a trust for the child. It will be managed ethically. He'll have everything he needs, but not a cent to fuel your greed. Jason slammed his fist on the table. You're destroying this family. No, I said softly. I'm exposing it. I stood, walking slowly around the table. You all built a life on illusions, money that wasn't yours, loyalty that was never real, love that came with receipts. Grandma saw it long before I did. Then I pulled out the second folder, a collection of documents with familiar signatures. Forged power of attorney forms, fake property transfers, bank attempts traced directly to Patricia's laptop. Should I go on? Dad swallowed hard, his face ashen. We can explain? You've spent your whole lives explaining lies, I cut in. It's time you sign truths. I handed them a fresh set of papers. Option 1, full legal prosecution. Fraud, forgery, and theft. You'll lose everything, including your freedom. Jason's face went pale. Patricia reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Option 2, I continued. You sign these official resignations from all company positions. Written confessions acknowledging your actions. In return, you'll each receive a modest monthly allowance. Enough to live, but not enough to manipulate anyone again. Mom stared at the documents like they were a death sentence. You can't mean this. We're your family. I hesitated for the briefest moment. The word family, once sacred, now meaningless, hung heavy in the air. Then I nodded toward the photo of Eleanor hanging on the wall. She was my family, I said quietly. The rest of you were just shareholders. The silence stretched on. Finally, Dad reached for the pen. His signature trembled across the page like a confession carved into stone. Jason followed, his jaw tight, his eyes glassy. Patricia hesitated, but when she saw the guard step forward, she crumbled. Even Mom, my mother, who could charm senators into donations, couldn't find words this time. She just looked at me, her eyes hollow. How long? She whispered. How long was she planning this? I met her gaze evenly. Long enough to see you clearly. She nodded slowly, the fight draining out of her. For the first time, she looked small, like a woman who'd finally met the limits of her deception. When they finished signing, I gathered the papers into a neat stack. You'll receive your allowances through the legal office. The security team will escort you out now. Do not attempt contact, personal or professional. All communication will go through the attorneys. They stood up one by one, escorted quietly toward the door. No shouting, no dramatic exits, just the heavy sound of defeat. As Mom paused at the threshold, she turned one last time. Emma, what would she think of you right now? I looked up at Eleanor's portrait again. She'd be proud, I said simply. Because I didn't destroy you. I just stopped pretending you were good. The door closed behind them. For a moment, I stood alone in the room that had witnessed decades of arrogance and betrayal. The silence felt holy. I walked to the window, the skyline gleaming like a clean slate. My phone buzzed, a message from Mr. Weber. All documents received. Foundation approval pending. Shall we proceed with the charitable trust, Miss Crawford? I smiled, a quiet warmth blooming in my chest. Yes, I typed back. Let's begin. On the table, the last thing I picked up was Grandma's photo, the one taken at my graduation. Her eyes were alive, proud, almost amused, as if she'd known this day would come. I whispered softly, "You were right, Grandma. Sometimes silence is the loudest justice." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the room. And for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't anger, or grief, or vindication. I felt peace. 3 weeks later, the view from the top floor of Crawford Industries looked almost unreal. The same skyline that once represented ambition and greed now shimmered like a mirror reflecting something cleaner, something earned. The morning light slid across the polished conference table, illuminating the new company logo. Crawford Foundation, building futures, not fortunes. It wasn't just a rebrand. It was a rebirth. Mr. Weber's final message had come at dawn. All transfers complete. Legal proceedings finalized. Charitable foundation authorized. Congratulations, Miss Crawford. Eleanor would be proud. I sat there for a long time, reading those words over and over. Not because I doubted them, but because they felt like closure to a story that had haunted 3 generations. The Crawfords had always measured success in numbers, in stock charts, in estates, in Swiss accounts. But Grandma Eleanor had measured it differently. She saw legacy not as what you leave to people, but what you leave in them. And now, I finally understood what she meant. That afternoon, I held the first board meeting of the new foundation. Not a room full of suits and egos this time. It was teachers, social workers, and community leaders. We discussed scholarships for underprivileged girls, rehabilitation programs for single mothers, and healthcare grants for the elderly. I could almost hear her voice in the back of my mind. You can't change the past, Emma. But you can redirect its wealth towards something good. For a moment, I pictured her standing at the window in her Zurich home, that soft half-smile she wore when she knew something I didn't. It wasn't revenge she'd left me. It was direction. Later that day, as the sun dipped below the city, my lawyer informed me that Mom, Dad, Jason, and Patricia had all signed settlement agreements. They would keep their modest allowances. Their assets were frozen but not confiscated. Their names, however, would never again appear in any corporate record linked to me. It wasn't mercy I'd given them, it was a mirror. Because punishment wasn't about prison or poverty. It was about seeing yourself clearly after the illusion fades. And they were seeing it now. That night, I went home and opened the drawer of my desk. Inside, beneath the layers of legal papers and old letters, was the one thing I hadn't been able to touch until now, Grandma's key. The silver one with the mountain engraving. I turned it slowly in my hand, feeling the grooves under my fingers. It no longer unlocked a vault of money. It unlocked memory. The smell of her lavender perfume. Her calm voice over the crackling fireplace. The way she'd wink when the rest of the family bragged about profits and she'd whisper to me, "Real wealth is measured by who you become when they betray you." For years, I thought she meant forgiveness. Now I realized she meant clarity. I took a walk that evening through the quiet streets of Boston. The wind had the faint chill of autumn, carrying the scent of rain and coffee. A small bookstore near the corner caught my eye, its window lit warmly, a help wanted sign taped to the glass. A young woman stood behind the counter, maybe 19 or 20, nervously practicing her smile at customers who weren't there. For a second, I saw myself in her, alone, uncertain, holding dreams no one believed in. I stepped inside and bought the most expensive book they had, then slipped an envelope into the cashier's tip jar on the way out. Inside was a check from the foundation, her first scholarship grant. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Some victories don't need witnesses. When I returned home, my phone buzzed with a new message, unknown number. It was a photo. A single red rose placed on Grandma's grave, its petals glistening with dew. No text, no signature, just that image. For a moment, I wondered who had sent it. Perhaps Mr. Weber, perhaps someone from the bank. Or maybe, in some strange way, it was her. I smiled and whispered into the stillness, "It's done, Grandma. They can't touch it anymore." The next morning, as I prepared the closing remarks for our foundation's announcement video, I wrote the words that would end it, words that felt like hers, not mine. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's legacy. It's using what they meant to destroy you, to build something that outlives them all. I paused, staring at the line on my laptop screen. Then I added one final sentence. Thank you for watching. May you always protect the love and truth that money can't buy. And if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe, for every story of justice deserves to be heard. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The sound of rain began again, gentle against the glass, almost like applause. In that quiet room, surrounded by paperwork, letters, and a framed photo of Grandma Eleanor, I realized the story wasn't about inheritance at all. It was about transformation. She hadn't just left me wealth. She'd left me wisdom disguised as war. And in that battle, I hadn't just won. I'd become what she always believed I could be. Not the disinherited daughter, but the architect of her redemption.